the logistical nightmare that happens when there's a crisis that requires response, and being able to provide a system that makes it incredibly easy for all of these different agencies to share information is really what we're focused on. There are so many incidents that first responders are truly on the front lines, and we need to be empowering them with the tools and the systems that help them share information with the public, but also help them share information between each other and stay safe themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Suzette Leboy, the Editorial Director for Opportunity Miami, and today we are joined by Bailey Farren. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We are going to talk about the mechanics of disaster response, and that seems like a lot to discuss in one quick conversation. But for the general public like myself, can you kind of give us brief, almost background of what that entails?
Absolutely. Well, whenever there's a major crisis that requires any kind of response from the public safety side, you have so many different types of response agencies that are all coordinating together in order to contain or respond to the incident. So something that I learned about disaster response when I was starting my company is, it's not just one group, two, three groups that are involved in this process. And it's not localized to just the region that's experiencing the disaster, but there are dozens, if not hundreds or more groups that are all coming together to help respond to the disaster. And they're coming from all over the United States in some cases, and others all over the world.
That seems like a logistical and data sharing communication nightmare in so many ways, especially during a disaster. Do I have that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. After every single after action of any disaster, I'm sure that coordination and communication are at the top of the list of things that can be improved.
And that's then how you got interested and involved in co-founding Perimeter. Can you kind of give us a debrief of what type of technology company Perimeter is?
We are a mapping platform that allows first responders to share information in real time between each other and their communities during disasters, emergencies, or even day-to-day operations and special events. And it's something that I first came to because I'm from one of those communities that has been very impacted by natural disasters. So I'm from a county in Northern California, and we have had 5 major evacuations from fires in the last 8 years. And that's the first time that I was exposed to the challenge that you mentioned about disaster response, where all of these groups are coming together, but they don't have the tools to share information in real time between each other or with people like me who need to evacuate.
And you also come from a line of first responders. Do I have that correct?
I do, yes. My dad's a firefighter, mom's a retired paramedic. They were very, very supportive, but they were also really helpful in opening doors to help me speak with the first responders who I really needed to get to know, understand their problems, etc., when developing a solution like this, because developing solutions for government, for public safety, they're not easy solutions to build. And I believe the only way that we're going to build the right features and the right tools that these different groups need is by spending a lot of time with the people who are on the front lines themselves. And so having 2 first responder parents and coming from a first responder family definitely made it a lot easier for me to just start those conversations and have exposure to dozens and dozens of major disasters, not just in my hometown, but for other crises that I was able to go and ride along at, travel to, etc.
And how does the software work exactly? Can you kind of give us a play-by-play of how it operates and how it works?
Yeah, so on the first responder side, they work with an iOS app or Android app. And what they can do is it's a very intuitive map-based system. And so when they log into the app, they're able to see what's going on, what information has been added, whether it's hazards or resources or staging areas, potential impact or inundation zones. And for the folks who have admin access, they can also push information in real time to residents who are also using the system. And first responders, regardless of their admin access, can also collaborate themselves. So they can add points, routes, polygons if they're out in the field and they're seeing that there's an area that's impacted by a flood, or there's a tree down, a power line down, any kind of hazards or even potential resources, they can in a couple seconds, they can just add that to the map, and it can be displayed to all of the first responders who share a team with them. Now, on the public side, it's a little bit different. So the public does not have to download anything. So we learned that opt-in rates for any kind of alert and warning system on average are at about 5% across the US. And so we learned very quickly, okay, data shows that people don't usually opt into things when it's a blue sky season. If we stand a chance of actually getting this life-saving information into people's hands about where to go, how to get there, etc., then we have to get it to them in a manner that doesn't require any kind of opt-in or sign up in advance. And so the way that the community uses Perimeter is they just go to perimetermap.com. It'll jump to their location if that's something that they share with their browser. And from there, they can see what information around me is relevant that I might need to respond to. So first responders have the collaborative app that they use to share information between each other, very simple, very map-based. And then on the public side, they have a map that they access just through that web link, that website.
When you consider if the problems that you're solving, obviously it's communication and data sharing. Is there anything else more specific that I might have missed there?
Well, I think that this might not be more specific, but just collaboration as a whole. We mentioned this at the very beginning, the logistical nightmare that happens when there's a crisis that requires response, and being able to provide a system that makes it incredibly easy for all of these different agencies to share information is really what we're focused on. 5 years ago, when I was first starting to have those evacuation experiences, what I learned is that most first responders are actually relying on paper maps and radios in order to access or share most of the situational awareness information that they need on scene. What we're doing is making it so easy for these different groups to collaborate who historically have actually never had a system that allows them to do that. And that's one of the reasons why I felt so compelled to start this company, because at the time I was living in Berkeley, California, so just outside of Silicon Valley, and I felt like I was swimming in all the tech buzzwords. And yet, when I went to help my family evacuate, I found out that firefighters like my dad aren't even being tracked in the field. Whereas for me, as a civilian, I can track a burrito every meter on its way to my apartment if I order it online. That juxtaposition, that contrast, made it so clear that this needed to exist and that the world was ready for it to exist.
So tell us where you are today with Perimeter in terms of like how big of a company you are and kind of where you're going to next.
We are a 12-person company today. We started deploying the platform formally last year on January 1st. We actually, our very first deployment, despite signing our contracts and being ready to go January 1st, our first deployment was actually January 2nd for catastrophic flooding. Since that first activation of the platform, we've been used for many catastrophic floods, but also wildfire evacuations, bomb threats, day-to-day road closures, hazardous material spills, lots of resource distribution sites, sandbags, etc. There are so many incidents that require information sharing between these public safety agencies or with the public. And right now, most of these counties or state agencies are pretty limited to things like social media in order to push information out. But on social media, they're having to, in many ways, compete with a lot of misinformation, people who are sharing information, but who maybe don't have it right. As of last year, we have made Perimeter something that can be a standard for truth for a lot of the residents who usually would go to Twitter for their information. And now they're able to see, here's the map. This is where the evacuation zones are going to be updated. I can go here for real-time information.
Which government agencies are you working with now? Where can we find Perimeter being used today?
So we started on the West Coast, as you probably could guess. So we're spread across 10 counties and one state agency between California and Nevada. But as of this year, we've also started deploying in Florida. And so we've been really focused on starting conversations in Florida because, of course, the need for real time information during emergencies is just the need is through the roof in a place like Florida. For us, being there and getting the platform into people's hands, especially in some of those regions who, are still on paper in many cases, is going to be a really meaningful way, not just to ensure that the public is able to get the information that could save their lives, but also so that the public safety agencies can spend more time doing what they do best and less time having to spend on social media pushing information out. We still use social media heavily, and I think that's not going away. I don't think it should. I think our agencies are so focused on, typically they have to send out like text-based information about what's happening, but when you can send out text-based information but accompany it with map-based information, it's so much easier to share and it's easier to digest for everyone who's reading it. So I think we also help our agencies on the West Coast and in Florida save time when it comes to getting information out to people.
And here in Miami, where we are based, we know when a major hurricane is going to likely pass through this area. We can also anticipate heavy flooding during certain seasons here in Miami, as well as extreme heat, which we know is only going to get worse. How can perimeter be implemented then in an area like Miami, where we already have some sort of strategies and communications in place, but we maybe need a little bit more?
Miami is a great example of a city and county, Miami-Dade, that has really been on the forefront of new solutions, technologies, and systems. And even though there are such great systems today for things like pre-planning that you mentioned, there's also a really big question of when an incident happens, regardless of what was pre-planned for, there's a question about what is actually taking place. And so what we've seen is, even though there's a tremendous amount of predictive modeling in some cases or historic data that can point to an area that might be impacted, that might flood, what we've found is during an actual disaster, things might happen a little bit differently than anticipated. And that's where a system like Perimeter can be so effective at getting the real time information out, because we make it so easy for our public safety agencies to add information on the fly that even if the pre planning and the reality of the situation don't perfectly overlap, you can use our system to push information that might help people respond to the way things actually are. We are really focused on that immediate real time use case. Even though we support and work with the pre planning side very extensively, the thing that makes Perimeter really unique is that in just a couple seconds or minutes of something changing, something that people need to respond to, first responders and the public safety agencies responsible for getting information out can do it immediately. I think as we see disasters continue to increase in frequency and severity, whether it's heat or massive storm systems, we know that there are going to be increased needs in terms of getting information to the people who are on the front lines and enabling them to get that information into the hands of the public. There are so many incidents that first responders are truly on the front lines, and we need to be empowering them with the tools and the systems that help them share information with the public, but also help them share information between each other and stay safe themselves.
Are you in discussions with Miami-Dade County or any area in South Florida?
Conversations have started. We don't have anything official to announce at this point, but if you know any folks on the emergency management side or fire or law enforcement, we're always happy to have a conversation.
Perfect. We'll do some introductions for sure. And closing out, we focus here at Opportunity Miami, we focus on the year 2040. How do you envision Perimeter operating in the year 2040, especially in areas like Miami?
Our mission at Perimeter is to ensure that every person who needs to respond to an emergency or a disaster has the information that they need to do so. Information that could protect their life, the lives of their loved ones, and of course, our mission is also to do the exact same thing for first responders, to ensure that they have the information that they need to make the best decisions for life safety. In 2040, I see Miami-Dade as truly being on the forefront, and not just because there are so many resources and there's really I think a culture of innovation in Miami, but also the need is just too great to ignore. And so I think by 2040, there are going to be incredible systems in place for getting people information, and those systems will be very necessary. And I hope Perimeter is a part of that story.